Good evening and a very warm welcome to The Big Debate. I'm your host, Iguma Gabriel. Thank you for joining us, and you can interact with us using the hashtag Seetv Big Debate because we would like to hear from you as we go through the show for tonight. Again, thank you for joining The Big Debate. On the 9th of August 2022, Kenyans went to the polls to elect their fifth president and also leaders at various levels. Attention of the world was mainly on the presidential election, which pitted long-time opposition candidate Raila Odinga against the deputy president, William Ruto. William Ruto has been deputy president since 2013, and Raila Odinga has contested or tried to be president of Kenya 5 times now. The IEBC gave the results and it announced William Ruto, as the next president or president-elect of Kenya. Raila Odinga and his team have decided to contest those elections, and they expected to go to the Supreme Court. The world was watching, violence was expected, and yet this election seemed to go quite smoothly. What does this mean for Africa, where elections are usually very contentious and quite violent? What lessons can we learn? Coming to the local scene, there's been quite a bit of movement in Uganda's politics. Our guest today is in pole position to comment and put some of these things in context, what they mean for Uganda, and to put in context some of the political happenings in our country. Let's meet our guest for tonight's Big Debate.
Our guest tonight, General Gregory Mugisha Muntu, is a Ugandan politician and retired military officer. He's the founder of the Alliance for National Transformation and a political party founded in March 2019, in which he contested under for the presidency of Uganda in 2021. General Muntu has previously served as the president of the Forum for Democratic Change Party (FDC) and as commander of the army, the highest position in the Ugandan military from 1989 to 1998. When the National Resistance Army was renamed the Uganda People's Defense Forces, General Muntu became the commander of the UPDF. Muntu was a member of the Constituent Assembly in 1994-1995 and a parliamentarian, and was selected by the members of the Ugandan Parliament to serve as one of the 9 Ugandan representatives to the East African Legislative Assembly, EALA. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest tonight.
There you are, our guest for tonight. General, good evening and welcome to the Big Debate.
Good evening, Gabriel.
It's very
good. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's very good to have you for the first time on Seetv.
Yeah, it's my first time on Seetv.
Yes.
Pleasure is mine.
Well, what have you been up to, even before we go into the issues for tonight?
We're still involved as a team of leaders within NT in party building. You know, it's a painstaking process, but it's a process we enjoy because we know at the end of it all, once we've put in all the effort necessary, we have established a firm foundation on the basis of which the party can live long beyond its founders. Unfortunately, on this side of the world, in the continent of Africa mostly, we don't seem ever to want to build things which last. You know, organizations just dissipate immediately. The founding fathers and mothers, you know, leave the scene. They just more or less disappear. I mean, we just talked about Kenya, KANU, which was the founding, you know, I mean, the first independence party. I think in the last parliament had less than 10 members of parliament, but there's a time when it had
majority,
the majority
yes.
There. Yeah. And in a number of African countries, Zambia, Ghana, Nigeria, all those completely wiped out. The parties which started at independence. And some, even now, the contemporary African politics, many countries, Parties simply come on the scene, 2, 3 years, 4 years, they disappear. We just don't want to do that. So we are focused on building alliance for national transformation.
The Ugandan parties that we had at independence, yes, may not have significant representation in parliament, but at least they're still there.
Yes, but in many countries, even those that are there are so marginal, like CCP of Ghana. The last time I saw it had only 1 member of parliament. UNIP completely disappeared. It's no longer in existence in Zambia. You know, the ones of Nigeria, they never survived after the coups. They never resurrected. You know, Ghana, I'm not. Yeah, Ghana, indeed, it was CCP. So it's a sad story, but it's also an experience we need to learn from.
Right.
Yeah.
As you followed what was going on in Kenya, you know, what things came to your mind? And I'm sure it was inevitable for you to make comparisons with what happens here in Uganda and other African countries when it comes to elections.
Yeah. What I think we need and we should give to the Kenyans is they seem to have learned from their past mistakes. And they have made significant progress comparing the election they've just gone through with what they have gone through in the past. Because the process itself, right from the periods of campaign, the nominations and then the campaigns, they had done adequate work in terms of doing the necessary reforms in the electoral laws. Some of them which were quite significant. And they went through the whole campaign, possibly almost a year. No conflicts in terms of fighting, no suppression by the state security apparatus. Went through campaigns, very stiff competition, but minimal levels of violence. And also no confrontation by the police with any of the actors. And then the elections day itself, peaceful, and the processes or the mechanisms which were put into place for the voting, for the transmission of votes. First, to have done amendments in their law to provide for counting and declaration of results, including the presidential at the polling station itself, was a significant breakthrough. Something we've been struggling, for here, and up to now it has not yet been achieved. Transmission of results, the IEBC, and them being done in a transparent way, and immediately they were received, they were disseminated to all the parties. So I think the process itself was credible, transparent, and the only snag now is at the end process, after the tallying and then the announcements. Nevertheless, even with the current challenges that they are facing, at least you can see that in spite of the tensions that there have been, that they are all focusing on going through the court process to challenge even ASMIO, which is contesting the announcement by the IEBC. Even with the split within the IEBC itself, you can see that their intention is to go to court. And I think, believing that the court processes themselves, as we have seen in the past, that the judiciary in Kenya has tended to be independent and also being able to make certain bold decisions, even when there would be a sitting government. Ordinarily, in this part of the world, where the executive is always overbearing and domineering over the executive, the legislative branch and the judicial branch of of the state. In Kenya, we have seen where the judiciary has made certain bold decisions, you know, which even impact on governments themselves. So I believe there is that trust already within the Kenyan people. So in that regard as well, I think we have to credit the Kenyan people and those who've been involved in activism, those who've been involved in the legislative processes, ensuring that wherever they have found weaknesses in the past, that they have done the necessary amendments and put provisions within the law that can protect the political processes.
All right.
So,
well, you pointed reforms they have had in their law in order to make these processes move smoothly. But can't some of it be attributed to the actors? Because many times the actors in Uganda's politics are accused for being the ones who cause and lead to escalation of violence.
Actually, most cases, most of the violence is always sparked off by the irregular and uncalled for behavior of the police, and also the police being manipulated by the government. That's what I always notice, and also the sitting government manipulating the parliament and the processes through which amendments could have been done. Because you ask yourself, why on earth would anybody contest against counting of votes and declaring votes at the polling station itself? Why on earth would why would anybody, contend against that? It's in everybody's interest, unless anybody has got intentions of rigging, which is always the case here, particularly, So until we get people who are sane, and also those who are bold, sane who are at the level of the executive, and also those who are bold at the level of the parliament, to be able to, amend the laws and put in provisions which are as simple as that, to say that voting, the counting of votes, and declaration of results needs to be done at the polling station. But here it's strange that there's been resistance from the sitting government. They go out of their way to manipulate the process of legislation, and that's why we've never had it achieved. Yeah. Or like we noticed in Kenya, there were so many areas where people were tarrying the results. And at least they were disciplined enough not to announce, because at least because they respect the processes, nobody interferes in the tarrying process by TV stations, radio stations, and all nature of groups that would be interested in tarrying. But they're also disciplined enough not to announce, because they know that the Electoral Commission is the one which makes the announcements. Mandated to announce, yes.
All right. Well,
here they would have shut down, as we have seen in the past.
All right, and yes, you have talked about some reforms in the law in order to make some of these things possible.
Yeah.
Well, part of what we saw in Kenya, it didn't happen this year, but previously, the process of getting to who will head the Electoral Commission, that being a public process, calling for applications, and that person being vetted publicly. And you could see that when President-elect was giving his, his first speech, he credited the chairperson quite a bit and really referred to the chairperson as the hero. Are there things that Uganda can learn from that process, or is our system working well for us?
I've never believed that it is necessarily the weakness in terms of who appoints. I think the weakness is in those who, I don't know that's in the nature or character of the political elite, or generally the elite in these countries overall. Because I also know countries where the appointments are done by presidents. But the moment they are appointed, they perform their duties according to what they are required to do. And I know of examples. I know, for example, like in Ghana, the president appoints the chief justice. The president appoints the electoral commission. South Africa, the president appoints the electoral commission. He appoints the chief justice. In Botswana, the president appoints the chief justice. And the electoral commission is by virtue of the offices held, because I think one of the heads is a judge.
A judge, yes.
A judge. But in Ghana, they have had some of the closest contested elections. Like when the current president came in, the person he defeated had run for only one term. I think Mahama, he was running for a second term. He lost, and it was, I think, a small margin, about 100,000 votes or something like that. So the party got out of power, was voted out of power. The president who was running for a second term also got out of power. So basically, it's the culture that evolves, that is nurtured within a country. It's not who appoints. That's my belief. Yeah.
All right. Part of what we've seen in Kenya is, you know, alliances, coalitions, because the ones that participated in this election different from the ones that were in the 2017 election, and we can go, you know, a couple of elections backwards. How come they managed to come together and, you know, contest for the presidency? A thing that seems to have evaded, especially, you know, the opposition here in Uganda.
I didn't pick exactly the...
In Kenya,
yes,
for almost all the elections, we have alliances, we have coalitions contesting for power. That seems to be something that has evaded, especially the opposition here in Uganda.
The Kenyan political dynamics are a bit different. Even the nature of their coalitions are not around parties, they are around more or less individuals. Even parties more or less are built around individuals. There seems to be a shift in this last election. There seems to be a shift, and one hopes that the trend will continue. The dynamics are different. Here for some, I don't think I can put a finger onto the reasons why they're able to do that and we're not able to do that. Yeah. I'm not so sure I can put a finger onto that.
But are the political actors, because you have worked with political actors on the government side, in the opposition, are they able to come together for a common good, like we seem to see in Kenya?
Kenya, I don't know how to... I basically don't know the reasons why, because it's not as if the coalitions, mostly which are mad, I can't easily decipher. Let me be honest with you. I'm not able to understand exactly what motivates the Kenyan coalitions. But the biggest desire is, I think they notice that getting into power requires them to make those necessary compromises, which they ordinarily do. Here, because it isn't that the opposition here doesn't desire to get into power, they would desire to get into power. But for some strange reason, none of the coalitions we ever tried to build, 2011, 2006, 2011, 2016, none has ever worked yet. But again, maybe let me hazard it this way. Normally, in Kenya, those coalitions also, as an outcome of the pressures from the followers of the different groups. Because in Kenya, there's a tendency of having blocks. So normally you'll find that there will be a block around Raila, there'll be a block around Kalonzo, there'll be a block around Mudavadi, there'll be a block around Ruto. There'll be a block, like in the case of Kibaki, from central region. And then they'll be looking at how do they create an alliance to get into power. And you find that there are many blocks of that nature. In the Ugandan opposition politics, what I have noticed is that even when at the top there is failure for leaders to come together, people still coalesce around one opposition candidate. That happened in 2006, 2011, 2016. Because even when you look at those who ran from the opposition, the population that wanted change right around Dr. Chiza Besigye. In 2021, people wanted change right around Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi. Now that wouldn't have happened, for example, in the Kenyan dynamics. There is no way you would, for example, have had people of Ukambani abandon Kalonzo and voted, for example, for Raila if Kalonzo was running. Or for people to have abandoned Raila and gone for Ruto if Ruto was running. No, I don't mean now, I mean even in the past elections. Here, that happens. So you can see the dynamics in the two countries are completely different. That there, when a key leader moves, the bloc moves with that key leader. And maybe, I think in the discussions that they normally hold, they are all looking at how do we get into power. And then the parliamentary members, candidates, and those who are governors, and those who are in the Senate, because all of them are looking at how to get into power, maybe it forces them to form those kinds of coalitions. More or less knowing that if their principal is running, they are going to fall literally behind that principle. And if the principal recognizes that if he doesn't go into a coalition, then there will be a lot of pressures in that regard. Here, when there is failure to coalesce at the top, at the level of leaders, the population moves and coalesces around the individual whom they think has got a chance to oust the incumbent.
All right.
The dynamics, therefore, are different. Why is it so? I don't think I'm able to hazard a guess right now.
All right. Yeah. Looking at Kenya, Kenya is the biggest economy in the East African community, and we take many lessons from Kenya. After Kenya going through a process like this, does it have any implications for the especially East African community that is now consolidating and even becoming bigger?
Kenya is a key factor, of course, it's the largest economy in the region, in the 7 East African countries. So that's why I really hope that they are going to stabilize, that nothing destabilizes them, even when there is contention on the outcomes of the vote. Because if Kenya became unstable, it would destabilize the whole region, more so us who are, landlocked. And they are good at surviving. They survived the 82 attempted coup. They survived the conflict of 2007. They were able to contain the fallout within a very short period of time. It was ugly, all right. There were a lot of casualties, people died. But they were able to pull together immediately the different sides and engage in discussions which stabilized that situation. So in that regard, yeah, Kenya is a critical factor as a building block, the whole East African economic development process. They have matured, yes, in terms of even containing what could become fallouts in terms of conflicts that could destabilize their politics and the economy.
Yes.
They still have challenges, yes. They have challenges that they have to contend with, like we are contending with challenges ourselves. But I think they have made significant progress, and I would like to trust that they'll be able to manage through this whole process and see how they can continue building their economy.
All right. And Uganda, there are, confirmed reports that Uganda was involved in the election in a negative way. Is there a way from where you sit in which that can negatively impact the relationship? Also, the visits that both candidates did make to the country, and the circumstances surrounding those visits. Because, for example, on one of William Ruto's attempted visits to Uganda, he was stopped from coming.
Yeah.
Yes.
General Museveni is always meddling in the regional politics in ways which, I suppose most of the countries around have gotten used to that, and I would like to believe that they have learned how to manage that internally within themselves. I have a feeling that if it comes to like elections, much as there could be, eventually there could be alliances over a period of time as we grow into more and more areas of cooperation, economic as well as political. If we eventually have a region that is going to be integrated at the political level, there would have to be alliances across the different countries. But one would hope that those kinds of alliances will also be built in a positive way, in a constructive way, not to undermine, not to destabilize. So one hopes we'll be able to develop that culture. The biggest threat and danger, I think, would be when there are vested interests across different countries. More so, like the vested interests would be like in scratch my back and I scratch your back. You find that people are doing cross-border business but in corrupt ways.
Right.
That can be a problem for the whole region. So we need all to watch out. People who would want to see transparent ways of how politics functions, not only in the individual, the component parts in terms of countries, but also eventually what happens at the regional level in case the integration process keeps on maturing. We all have to be very alert to that. If anything, I think all patriots in the different countries or East African-minded people really need to do all things which are necessary to ensure that not only do they contain, but they fight and they eliminate marked practices like abuses of power and like corruption. So that by the time there is full integration, economic as well as political, that the culture we have noticed, which has been planted within the individual countries, does not contaminate the politics at the regional level the moment we go into that full scale. So the efforts which are being exerted in the different countries to fight those kinds of ills needs to be extended beyond the borders of countries, for there to be networking, for there to be collaboration, so that the effort is dual. One, eliminate those malpractices in the individual countries and not give it those kinds of malpractices or a culture of that nature to ever take root at the regional level. Yeah.
Some of the reforms and some of the good practices seen in Kenya have been attributed to reforms they had in their law. Particularly, people will point at the constitutional amendment in 2010. There have been attempts in Uganda to reform our laws, and as an actor, what's holding those reforms back, and can they actually if those reforms were put in place, can they transform the way our elections are?
Kenya, there was a very strong coalition of different actors in the civil society. They've had a very vibrant civil society sector, people involved in politics in the different parties who are reform-minded, and the business community. The pressure that was exerted on a consistent basis eventually led to the outcomes of the successful reforms which they conducted. It hasn't been the case here yet. So we have to keep on, fighting until we reach that, turning point when the necessary reforms can also be done here.
All right.
Yeah.
Our reforms have to go through Parliament, and one of the, descriptions of our Parliament, if we look at shades of opinion, the NRM party, that is the ruling party, has got an overwhelming majority. Therefore, reforms that could be looked at as the NRM as not favorable for them would barely make it through that house. As opposition parties or parties that are contending for power, how would you push such reforms through when you do not have the numbers in the legislature?
I think one thing they need to recognize is that they're Ugandans first. So they should do things which are in the interest of the country. As citizens, because that's what you are first. Even before you are a member of parliament, or even before you are representing a political party, you want to see stability in the country. And therefore I would like to believe that wherever anybody is, that they would be wanting to do things that would bring stability in the country, that would create an environment in which a new culture develops, where there would be accountability, where there would be checks and balances were established and entrenched within the governance systems. Because if you don't have those, then you are vulnerable wherever you are, whether you're in the minority, whether you're in the majority. Because if there's an implosion, if you let people abuse power to the extent that it creates an implosion in the country, does it matter where you are? You could be in the largest party, but once there's an implosion, you'll just get the flak. So it would be short-sighted on their part to think that because they're in a ruling party that they should just handle things as carelessly as they do. It's just short-sightedness. It just can't be because they're in a ruling party. Because they're in a ruling party, but the platform on which you are standing, in this case, a country, if you find that there are cracks in it, you should be working to ensure the cracks are repaired. But if you continue churning on as if they seem not to have seen, they seem not to have learned lessons on what happens in other countries where implosions happen. It can be very high cost.
One of the recent developments on our political scene has been, a leader of a major political party, the Democratic Party, joining and working with the ruling party. He is now at the level of a cabinet minister, the Honorable Norbert Mao, as being the Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs. That has been received with mixed reactions across the board. How did you receive that news? What, in your view, how does this, play out for democracy in Uganda?
Maybe I can only repeat what I said then, because it's the same way I would still understand it. That Honorable Norbert Mao, one, is an intelligent person, and I would like to believe that he took time to do analysis, and therefore that led to a decision that he made, because it's not something I think that he just woke up just one day and decided to make that move. However, I tend to see, as I said then, him and the party are really treading, on a very slippery path. The environment in which we are operating is very complex. And what I don't know is whether he reached the conclusion that he can trust the people he's dealing with. if he made a correct analysis and indeed he can trust them, and if they promise that they would be straight with him and they keep the end of their promise to be honest with him, and they focus on doing things that would be meaningful in terms, for example, of bringing reforms, then history would absolve him. But if their basis for the trust that they would have had to make that decision is on shaky ground, if the other side was simply trying to take him for, down the garden path, then he's cooked.
Cooked.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because there are people, there are some we know whom you at times tend to believe that these are people who will tell you one thing in the morning and do something different in the evening. And when you're dealing with such people, you really have to be very careful. Because, I mean, we are talking about, you trust a person, they've given you their word, assuming that they have a word, that they can keep it. If they do, yes, you can do certain things and people can say, okay, we thought it was a wrong decision, but it has turned out to be a correct decision. But if they are untrustworthy, if they can't keep their word, then they're just going to be hung up there to dry. Basically, you become so vulnerable. So it's just a question of time. We'll see what happens. I don't trust a number of those actors there in the regime.
You've worked with those actors before. Why do you come to the conclusion
Many of them,
that...
I wouldn't give them my back. I know how they operate.
You say that in your words, the Honorable Norbert Mao is an intelligent person. And yes, part of what the opposition and civil society have been pushing for are electoral reforms. These are brought by government mainly to Parliament,
yes,
and specifically the ministry,
yes,
where he is now the minister. The Supreme Court has also directed,
yes,
on the same issue.
yes.
Are you going to put pressure for somebody we can call one of your own to now try and take those reforms forward?
If one assumes that he can originate them and move them, or through his influence of that office, the tendency has always been that unless General Museveni steps in and is willing to move in that direction, the question is he willing?
You have worked very closely.
Because when you look at the
Museveni
dynamics, you seem to see a different trend developing. So you ask yourself, you literally see the dynamics going in a totally different direction.
Different direction can be positive. In this case, are you referring to going a different direction that's positive or negative?
Negative, because in the tendencies that I see developing, they are not in the national interest. Most of them is just about advancement of the interests of a very narrow group of people who just look at money almost as the beginning and the end of life.
The president has said that
money and power, because the two are mixed. There are people who are like been so sucked into that mindset of the mixture of money and power. It's like without it they would die.
President Museveni has said that he's willing to work with, whichever leaders and opposition parties that are willing to work with the NRM. Is
Yes.
this something that the Alliance for National Transformation would consider?
I wouldn't speak for the party in regard to that. I would respect whatever decision the party itself would make if they chose to, say, work with the government. I cannot speak for myself.
You are a founding member. What would your position
as an individual?
Yes.
The only time I, as an individual, or even if I was to advise the party, for them to work with a regime like this one, is if the party had the upper hand and is the one that would be guiding the direction of things. But if the party like Alliance for National Transformation or any other opposition party, if I was to be asked for my advice, would be, if you're not in control, don't engage, don't get in. Why? Because when you're in a position to influence the direction of politics, the influence of managing the economy, to do things in a manner in which you desire to see them happen, then you've got the opportunity to change the direction of politics in the country. But if you are in there and you don't have the leverage to change the direction of things, you'll be taken down the garden path. Eventually, by the time you finish 2, 3, 4 years, you may not be different from the people you are engaging with. And I've seen that happen in many African countries, where an opposition party gets in partnership with the ruling party, but they don't have the leverage to change the direction of politics, to fight, you know, in an unfettered way, fight corruption, for example. You lose control over your own members, you lose trust of the public because you not have any impact in fighting and causing the changes which the population would desire to see happen. And at the end of it all, you will even lose the support base or the trust the population would have had in you prior to you joining a regime of that nature. Because the tendency has been, and I have not seen any party in power that would have walked down the road of corruption and abuses of power, to have the internal self-correcting mechanisms for them to move from the path of corruption and go, for example, on the path of managing the national resources in a transparent way. So if you go in as a junior partner, and therefore you cannot cause that change, why on earth would you go in there? Unless you go there simply to participate in power. And maybe also join the gravy train. Yes, if that is the intention, there are many parties which have gone onto coalitions. But most of them have become so damaged that by the time they get out of such coalitions, they are damaged goods. I wouldn't, as a person, go in there. I would advise a party that I would belong to not to go in there, but if it chose to, that would be their business. I wouldn't go there with them.
That's your position in relation to
as
a coalition.
Yes,
as an individual. That's your position in relation to a coalition with the ruling party.
Yeah.
What of a coalition with other opposition parties?
The
because we've also seen that, taking root here.
Other opposition parties would have no problem. We have always been open when they invite to them. Because with the opposition parties, you can have a minimum agenda. You can have, for example, an agenda of throwing out a regime and then working out mechanisms. What do you do thereafter? Short term. But on other issues, there are areas where medium, long term, we may not be at par in the way we look at things, which is okay. But for purposes of getting to a coalition, for example, to remove a regime like this one, that one we have no problem, we can go into that. The only area, again, of where we have differences of approach is where we have different strategies. Again, we've never thought that that would have any problem in itself. Because a number of colleagues in the opposition, there are those who believe that, organizing now is uncalled for, and some of them even think that it's not possible. And yet, our main focus is organize all the time. Go down, build the grassroots infrastructure, recruit like-minded men and women. Like for us, we want to build a value-driven organization. Keep reaching out, influencing men and women of integrity. Prepare, because we believe that much as there is a dictatorship, that there's going to be a time when change will happen. And in our understanding, you cannot transform a country by just waiting for a chance to get into power. For you to be effective, even in managing power and moving a country like ours from where it is in a mess and putting it in the right direction, you must use every opportunity to prepare. So that when there is opportunity, and the opportunity meets with preparation, then you get success. But there are colleagues in the opposition who believe that the most critical thing is removing the regime. The moment the regime is out, then you can start organizing. There we have differences of approach, differences of opinion. Nevertheless, for us, it doesn't hamper us from continuing to build, organize, and those who may think it is impossible, it is not desirable at this point, it doesn't stop us from working with them, at least to achieve the minimum of regime change. So I don't see any conflict in that.
Earlier on, when you were, building your case around working with the ruling party, you cautioned, an opposition party getting into a coalition or some kind of alliance with the ruling party, you should be able to have leverage, you should be strong enough to change the direction of things.
Yes.
Doesn't that also apply in the opposition? And if we went by, that analogy that you use,
yes,
the Alliance for National Transformation would have very little leverage when it comes to deal with other opposition parties. They seem to be more established, they seem to have better representation at many levels, and therefore you wouldn't, be in pole position to change the agenda to drive things.
Yeah, but in this particular case, our coalition will be focused on the immediate regime change. Yeah. Once you've removed the regime, it doesn't stop you. One would hope that therefore there will be an environment for all parties to continue building and organizing themselves. More so that are ideologically focused on that, and would continue doing that. So I wouldn't see any problem in regard to not engaging in a coalition, because the immediate thing is change the regime. But there are things which we are focused on. Governance, for example, ensuring that we have zero tolerance to corruption, ensuring that we have transparent, once you are in there, if new contradictions emerge, for example, and you find that maybe there are parties that may not necessarily care about that as much as you care about that, then a new dynamic would develop. And then you'd have a fight out, a political one at that. But that one would be something that would be secondary now, and after taking power, it can become the primary factor that really creates a basis for difference. Yeah.
All right. General Muntu, in the second segment of the show, which we will be going into very soon, we're going to focus more on, what you're building at the Alliance for National Transformation and how exactly, you plan to transform this country, and probably starting with taking power. But before we get there, just to understand, you earlier on said you cannot decide for the party. Yeah. And you seem to imply the position where you sit is not, as influential as previously. And now, I've seen you on a number of occasions correcting that you're not, the chairperson or the president of the party. Just help us understand that dynamic and what your actual position in the Alliance for National Transformation is at the moment.
Yeah, first, what I'm saying now, I was saying the same thing even when I was the coordinator of the party. I'm not saying that now because I am not in a position to make decisions. I participate in making decisions. I can't dictate where the party goes. For example, if I said it would not be advisable for us to participate, for example, in a working relationship with the regime. If the majority said, no, let's work with, you can't say, no, don't. I mean, in that case, you take an individual position. when I was the coordinator, and even now when I'm no longer a coordinator. But giving background to that, we have three models in terms of parties, political parties in this country. We've got a party like DP and UPC. They have their own model because the presidents of those parties, when it comes to general elections, automatically they become the flag bearers of their parties. Then there's another model of FDC and JEMA. I think that's where even the movement falls. Only in regard to practice, it's almost a fait accompli when it gets to general elections. But their constitutions, the FDC, JEMA and the movement, the party flag for candidate for the presidency is competed for. Any party member who has got the requirements can compete even with the standing, the incumbent, the leader of the party. If the candidate for the presidential flag bearer is not the party leader, then you have a presidential flag bearer and a party leader, just like we did in FDC in 2015, because I was the party president, Dr. Vez Jawan as the flag bearer, and I swung the party behind him. ANT is different. When you become the leader of ANT, as eventually once we finish the grassroots infrastructure and we elect, first, the leader of the party is the chairperson. But the most significant thing is that whoever becomes the chairperson will get into that position very well knowing that they cannot run for any other elective position. They cannot run for the presidency of the country, or LC5 chairperson, or mayor, or MP. Their role is to concentrate on party building, party organization, prepare a robust vehicle that would put all its strength and resources behind the candidates that would be competing for the presidency, for the MPs, for mayor, for LC3s, down to the lowest. And two, that the party is immunized. So we don't get into a situation where, because the leader wants to focus on a particular office, that they start building their party around themselves and maybe falling into the temptation that they can manipulate internal processes. So far, this is the only party that has got that kind of arrangement. And when it works, we believe it would be, and I believe it would work. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. It can also start influencing the nature of politics in the country. We have an organization that is standalone, that develops its own, culture, its own ideology, and the strength of its internal operating mechanisms, and as an institution, and it's not built around an identity of any individual. Because for the last 60 years, we have seen what happens in this country. And therefore, we don't want to, tempt people. The people who are strong enough, who can build organizations, and they do that without themselves becoming literally the same, themselves and the party, where you don't find any difference. However, we don't want to depend on the goodwill or good faith of any individual, however good he or she is. Because we know that you can have a good leader one day, and then another day, someone who is really, of a different character comes in. We don't want to build an organization based on chance. And that's why we took that decision. So when I took the flag, I relinquished the leadership position of the party. Ali Salaso now runs the organization. And when we finish our grassroots infrastructure, we will elect, and they will have a substantive leadership. Yeah, but I participate in the top organ in decision making, and that's another culture we're trying to establish, to ensure that you build consensus in an organization, that you build a team of leaders. They don't depend on one single individual, because we have seen countries where there have been change on a sustained basis. Maybe let me use two examples. One is China. China is not a democracy in the sense of what we are trying to build here in Uganda, but in terms of showing that in 50 years, China moved from being a third world, more or less an underdeveloped country. It's now almost the second largest economy in the world, almost about to overtake America. But look, in all that period, they've had 9 changes. But because of the direction they chose to take as a party, Chinese Communist Party, the leader comes, goes, but they continue moving in the same direction. Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew was there for a long time, yes, but they built an organization so that even when he left the scene and those who have come, you know, to manage the politics and the economy of Singapore, even when you listen to their ministers, you listen to their leaders, you can see the consistency. You can see that these are people operating from the same page. That's because they built a culture. That's because they built a value system. That's because they have got, they subscribe to same principles. So regardless of who is in power, they are moving the same direction. When one generation is leaving, another generation will continue moving in that direction. That's why we have to build institutions. That's our thinking in Alliance for National Transformation.
All right.
Yeah.
General, we need to take a break at this point. We will continue the discussion with General Mugisha Muntu after these messages.
This is Seetv. Don't blink.
Sometimes in life, we spend all the time trying to live other people's life. And along the way, we lose who we are by copying what other people are doing in their relationship.
You see, from the last time I met your sister, I've not spent a day or a minute without thinking about her.
It's a good surprise on a Monday. This is nice.
So you and him are
We're just friends. Wow. Come on.
just friends.
You either tell me where you're from or you go back to where you've been.
Thinking it would work out for us, but yet to find out that's not who we are after experiencing our great disappointment.
She's in love with some other man, so classy, a gentleman, not bulldogs like you.
These are the mistakes girls do.
Now showing on Seetv. Don't blink.
Seetv is now on StarTimes. You can now catch all your favorite programs, our daily comprehensive news bulletins, and so much more on StarTimes channel number 248. Stay tuned for a world of endless possibilities. Seetv. Don't blink.
Welcome back from the break. Thank you for staying with us here on The Big Debate. I'm your host, Iguma Gabriel, and today we host retired Major General Greg Mugisha Muntu. He is the founding member of the Alliance for National Transformation. He was their flag bearer for the 2021 general elections, and he's just explained to us the way the structure in the party works. Today we started by looking at the election in Kenya and what that means for the political situation in, yes, in Kenya, the East African region, but particularly some lessons for Uganda. We've now transitioned into the politics here in Uganda, and I'd like to pick up from, something we started talking about at the end of the last segment, the structures of your political party, the Alliance for National Transformation. And you've been talking about organizing, and you did talk about organizing while you were in the FDC. In fact, when you were leaving the FDC, you talked about a difference of ideologies, and therefore you were going to leave FDC to continue with what they believed was the correct direction to go, and you were going to, have another vehicle that believed in organizing, building structures, and what have you. We've been hearing you say that for quite a while. If we look at, for example, the by-elections that we've had, your party has been silent in those by-elections, and yet
we have not participated.
Precisely, and yet we'd expect that from about 2019, building structures, you would have structures in some of these places that would be able to, have candidates and compete in those areas. What's actually going on? Is this building of structures, actually effective?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the moment you do the work that is necessary to be done, if you though have a limiting factor like we still have, nevertheless it doesn't discourage us. We keep on doing everything humanly possible to keep at it, though at a very slow pace. Resources, I think, is the biggest impediment for many of the parties in the opposition. But when you have adequate resources in terms of finance and logistics, and you get teams which can go on the ground and operate, for example, the sub-county level where we normally operate whenever we get the resources.
General Mutu, that's quite desirable, but for a party like yours, where are the resources going to come from? Because government is not going to give you resources.
We keep on mobilizing, people, keep sending the same message. And we believe that at some point we would be able to cover the whole country. Because we are people who believe that if you have the right idea and you are convinced about it, you don't let anything stop you from exerting effort. You just keep at it. Come rain, come shine. Yeah, that's what happens in life. And therefore, there's nothing that can discourage us from pursuing what we believe is the best solution for the politics of this country. So we'll keep at it.
What's that?
It doesn't matter whether the resources have not come yet, but we keep focused on that. Even if we do one sub-county in 1 month or even 6 months, we will keep at it until the time when we would be able to cover the whole country.
Well, that be frustrating for your, for your supporters, because if the processes are slow, it means the traction. They will not see traction from the.
Look at the whole world. Look at the whole world, Gabriel. How many people have succeeded in the different areas of endeavor? They are not always never the majority. But those who persist eventually succeed. Whether it's in the area of business, whether it's in the area of sports, whether it's whatever. There are people who are persistent once they are convinced that what they are doing is the correct thing to do. And we are that nature of people. Only that in this case it is in politics. Yes, there are people who fall off, there are people who get discouraged. But so does it happen in business. I mean, how many people never even attempt to pursue something which they feel they should do. But because at times they lack resources, they say this is an area, they don't go. Or they try once, they fail, they bail out. But those who persist eventually succeed. And if there is anything I have no doubt about in my mind, it is pursuing that course.
All right.
Yeah.
It seems like, at least my understanding of the organizing that you're doing is so that a day comes when the alliance can, you know, compete in an election and win.
Yeah.
But you have had, you know, key figures in the opposition saying elections in Uganda are not going to work. So how come you continue to go that direction
even if we don't win, you see, organizing itself also prepares you in how to manage a country, because who knows how power changes hands. To me, the question is not even winning the election. You organize to win an election. But in the event that you don't win an election, suppose change comes in different ways. The question is, do you have a credible alternative political force that can manage power? For example, when a vacuum occurs. That's the whole point. Because change happens. Change happens in different ways. And to me, that's not the main issue. I have never worried about change. Change happens. It comes in different ways. What worries me most is when change happens, do you have a credible alternative political force? One that can occupy a vacuum in case a vacuum occurs. But two, that has got the discipline, the focus, and the staying power to move a country from the mess in which it is and put it back on track. That's the question. That can't happen overnight. That can only happen when you have people who continue there in the trenches, building, organizing, pushing the correct messages, attracting the necessary personnel, the men and women of integrity. Because in this particular case, you want to change a country from where it is and put on the right track. And then character of people that therefore needed are those that have to be attracted now and do the necessary trainings and the networking and also harmonized thinking. Because you don't want to get into a situation where a country is in a mess, you've got a collection of people, different ways of looking at things, and they themselves are at times in a mess, and you want them to move a country out of a mess into, I have seen this happen. We saw what happened in 79. 22 groups met in Arusha. The regime was about to collapse here, because when the Tanzanian force attacked Amin, originally they thought they would stop in Mbarara and massacre and then move back. It was a punitive operations. But when they attacked Mbarara and massacre and the two towns fell and they advanced to Ruera, they detected through the intelligence gathering operations they were carrying out that actually the regime could easily fall. So they hastily brought Ugandan groups, 22 of them from all over the world in Arusha, in Moshi, and they formed what was UNLF. And they came here. People were old enough to follow what was happening in UNLF. They're like people who had seen, coming here to divide a carcass. Not people who are focused on turning around the country. And since that time, we've had an unfortunate history. We have people who get into power and they are not focused on using it to use the national resources to deliver service to the people. So, if you don't have people who keep working on that early enough so that when change happens, when an opportunity comes, then there is adequate preparation, and then you get success in that endeavor. You can't wait for it to happen just by accident. There must be a lot of effort put in. And that's what we are concentrating on ourselves. How change happens? We prepare to take power through an electoral process. If that is not possible, change can happen in different ways.
And if change happens different ways, different time, right now, is there a group that you believe is organized enough to fill that vacuum, if it did, happen?
At least for us in Alliance for National Transformation, for the very fact that we're even thinking about that in itself is a part of the preparation, because preparation is psychological. To know that you need to attract good men and women of character, of integrity, who become the core of the force that changes the nature of politics in this country. You have to be convinced about that. Because if you're not convinced, you won't even be moving in that direction in the first place. Yeah.
Where are these? Where are
what
these
frightens
men and women that you're talking about?
Oh no, I mean, Uganda is full of so many men and women of integrity. And what lacks, mostly in politics, is people who act as a core to establish the necessary systems that enable the good functioning of government. Because I look like in the private sector. I use this example many, many times. Look at the private sector. The big corporate bodies which are making profits, the ANTs of this, I mean the MTNs of this world, the Airtels of this world, the banks. Who runs them? I keep asking that question wherever I go out in the field. It's Ugandans. 96, 7 plus staff, senior, middle, low, Ugandans. But they make huge profits. So why is it that you walk across the street from a bank which is making profits, you go in a government office and you find the culture is different, the focus is different? It's the same Ugandans. In the side of the private sector, it's because they are corporate entities, they are owners who want to make profit. So they set up systems right from the time of recruitment. The internal organizational culture, the mechanisms for HR, for finance, for logistics, for all that, they set them up. So they recruit Ugandans who have the capabilities to run those companies. They don't care who your uncle is, who your mother is, who your sister is, they don't care. They look at, does this person have the capability? They bring them in because they want to make profit. In politics, unfortunately, it is like, you know, the focus is not profit, it is service delivery. But we've not had a set of Ugandans who come in with the same mindset and say, we need to run a country like you're running a business. Now, that has been worked upon. The group which takes power after this regime, if it has no adequate number of people who think in those terms, you can easily have change of faces in terms of who are in positions of governance, but same culture remains. So it frightens me in a sense when you find many people saying, no, after Jerome 7 is out, everything will be okay. Look at the country like Zimbabwe. Things has changed. The good thing is that Mugabe stayed out, you know, was removed, and he was, before he passed on, he was not in power. So you can imagine people who are just focusing at Mugabe as the problem. So when he was out of power, so where was the problem now? Same infrastructure, same culture, same thinking. Unless you get a new group with a different mindset. And we've seen this happen in many African countries. So what frightens me is that you find people are not able to decipher that. And we still operate from the same mindset, saying change will happen. The same thing actually used to happen in Kenya. They used to say, Bira moi, yote inawezekana. You know? But they are taking a bit of time also to move from that culture. They are still struggling. They are still fighting so many different things. They have succeeded, for example, now in managing an election. But look at, in the area of, for example, the fight against corruption. I don't think they have made
the kind of strides that
they would have wanted to. There has to be, there is nobody who will give you what they don't have. So if you want a new political culture, you have to start early to build a core of people who have what they will give the country. It just can't happen just in a haphazard way or by accident. It must be deliberate, conscious, focused actions on the part of those who want to cause that nature of change.
General Muntu, if we read the history books of this country,
yes,
you were once a part of people that took power.
Yeah. Yeah.
At that time, did you create the change that you wanted, or you had foreseen for the country?
Our tendency was dispersed because there were two tendencies. There are those who saw power as an end in itself. There are those who looked at power as a means to achieve what you desire to do. In the particular case, the ideas you fight for, the principles you'd want to see established. So the contention, internal contention between those two forces were outmaneuvered and literally neutralized. So
neutralized using lingo.
From within. So we started building again from military from scratch. You know, because the dominant force really are those who looked at power as a means to advance personal interests. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
As we look at a transition taking place in Kenya, from where you sit, how do you see a transition in Uganda happening?
Transition. I don't think anybody would, if all of us are honest enough, I don't think there's anybody who can easily say how it will unfold. I don't think even General Museveni himself is sure how it will. You know, that's the most sad thing.
Definitely, as
2005 was an error to change the constitution and remove the term limit. You know, I really hope we have people who do research who could reach out to the about 300 plus, actually around 400 people who initiated the change of the constitution. What they thought then and what they think now. I would really be interested to know where most of them fall in their thinking. I don't have any research. Nobody has done it anyway. But I would like to believe that possibly about 60, 70, 80% could not be regretting why they ever removed that term limit thing. It's a safety valve. It has worked in all other African countries where it has been retained. Here, it can easily cause disaster. So we pray that things turn out well, change happens smoothly, and stability is maintained. That's best case scenario. But there's also a possibility of a worst case scenario. Where things just
and I actually wanted you to build those scenarios for us, because you definitely have, you know, because of the position you hold in, you know, a political party, you definitely have done this, you know, scenario building in order to guide the way the party, you know, operates and things.
We are really walking a very slippery path. There's a lot of uncertainty. The internal dynamics within the ruling party itself. You can see factions, you can see groups positioning themselves. Because when a leader remains too long in power, and mostly when they get aged, basically, as day follows night, those feelings will emerge. We saw it happen by the time Saddam fell. You could see the dynamics within the Ba'ath Party that were within the family itself. You can see the same thing was happening with Mubarak. The same thing was happening with Gaddafi. Everywhere where there have been leaders who have stayed too long in power. That always happens naturally. You see it happening here. And basically you don't see any signs from General Museveni indicating that he's planning to bow out. Because he's literally, you know, planning to hang on to power.
Not even with the so-called, you know, Muhoozi project?
I hear people thinking like that. I think different.
How so?
Well, I keep reading, I keep trying to read General Museveni from a distance. I am not able to have any, I've not spoken with him since 2005. So, but I read from a distance. And I have a feeling that as long as he can walk, he can talk, he'll try it again.
Okay, that is your reading of, that's your reading of General Museveni. And if we were to take, you know, if we were to separate the two,
yes,
you know, and just look at what people have branded
yes,
a Muhoozi project.
Yes.
What's your view of it?
I don't know how, whether it will evolve to where people think it is evolving towards. I have my own doubts in regard to that. But even if there was any such intention, my contention is he can do whatever he wants to do in terms of running for the presidency or member of parliament or mayor or LC5, whatever he wants to run for. But he would have to get out of uniform. I've said that over and over. You know, nobody should operate above the law. It doesn't matter who you are, you know. Because the army is part of the foundation of state. The army is part of the foundation of the stability of a country. We have had 3 armies in this country. UPDF is the 3rd army. In spite of the conflicts we've had since 1962, now that there's UPDF, it has made its own errors, but with a new political dispensation, if there's a group of disciplined people, focused people, they can create the necessary environment for UPDF to professionalize and carry out corrective actions in terms of where they have made errors, and also regain stature and image in the public mind by doing the right things. I mean, we've seen countries which have gone through coups and chaos and they've retained the same armies. Nigeria, Ghana, Sudan, Egypt, armies have remained the same, even when they have really done at times some heinous things in their history. So that would be no different from in regard to UPDF. But in respect of those who put on uniform, no individual should play around with it. That's where my contention is. And it looks like they have kind of slowed down a number of things. I hope they will have the sense to respect, as I've said before, men and women who put on uniform, because they die. It's the highest price anybody can pay for his country or our country. You know, there are those who are still in Somalia, there are those who are in Congo, there are those who are in Central African Republic. So you respect that uniform. It doesn't matter who you are. If you don't understand that, then you have a problem.
And in this case, what are you referring to as respecting the uniform?
You follow the law. If they are saying for you to contend for any political office, you get out of uniform. You do that. More so, you don't do things which nobody else can do in the same position. So when we keep sounding out these we can call it advice or red flags or whatever anybody would want to call it, is because we're trying to build a culture in this country. There are those who don't care, but we also don't care about what makes them think that they can do things with impunity. Because we're in a country, we have 45 million people. It's a fast growing population. Another 25, 30 years, we become 100 million people. So we don't want to keep quiet about people who are so callous in the manner in which they do things, as if they are the only people in a country. I mean, you can't even understand. It's a country. So you have to ensure that we call them to order. Whatever happens thereafter, good things, positive things can happen because of the voices which keep being raised. Even if that doesn't happen, we do our duty. It's our responsibility to speak on certain issues of a fundamental nature. More so when there are issues, for example, of security. Because you can have contention in politics, in the economy, things can go down, can come up. Security is not an area where people should play around. We have seen people perish in the last 60 years. So we can't sit back and see people who seem not to be able to understand something that simple, that you don't act as if you are the beginning and the end. None of us is. None of us can become the beginning and the end. You know, so one hopes that a number of these colleagues of ours who are in the security services will just wake up. You know, we've gone through these things for quite a while, so.
I'm sure you have. I'm sure you've had and interacted with sections of the Ugandan public that believe that for anybody to hold political power in Uganda, they've either got to be in the army or have, you know, a history of being in the army.
Well, unfortunately, that has seemed to be the case for a while because of the history. But again, that's something that we have to work and eliminate. Because once you have stable institutions, once you have functioning systems, once you have a new culture where people can compete for power, then that becomes open for everybody. In the meantime, that's the most unfortunate thing that still happens. But it's not only here in Uganda, in a significant number of African countries. Yeah. I mean, you can see like what's been happening in Sudan. People took on the streets, they, you know, very bold, you know, in the manner in which they were confronted with the army and all that. But after that, the coalition between the army and the civilian population. And you can see the tensions and almost the marginalization of the aspirations of the people. Contention is still ongoing, you know. So it's a transitional, there are transitional issues. There are processes, but one hopes that there will be positive factors, not only for those who are in uniform, but those who are not in uniform, even those who have served in uniform and now are not in uniform, to see how there can be a coalescing of effort and thought around how do you domesticate, you know, the military. How do you demystify power in the manner in which it's exercised, to the extent, for example, that someone doesn't have to have been in the military to be able to lead a country. Because that's why there would be systems. That's why there would be those who are in the military. They would give the advice on security, you know. But it's a journey. So we have to keep working day and night to ensure that we get to that point where that happens.
All right.
Yeah.
Your colleagues in the opposition, I'm sure you have heard of people calling for civil disobedience and, you know, taking to the streets and people rising up. In your view, is this a way in which, you know, transition or, you know, an actual change of power can happen in this country?
It's a legitimate path. For me, I've always believed that people who feel inclined to, you know, engaging in civil disobedience, it's legitimate, it's constitutional, that they apply effort. The only thing that I would advise them is that they would have to spend more time, more effort, more resources in building, in organizing around that. My biggest concern is we say things, but we don't put our hearts in whatever we say. You know, we don't organize. That's one of the biggest weaknesses. Literally on all the fronts that we think can work. You know.
All right, General Muntu, we have to start bringing this to a close, but it won't be fair to our viewers and, of course, to you if we do not touch on the current economic situation and the, you know, escalating prices of commodities, fuel, and, you know, from your position, what can be and should be done about the situation, because it seems like things are only getting harder and harder.
It's tough. It's very tough.
And since you've been up country, we could be looking at things here in the city, and many times we're told, hey, there's food up country. You've been up country as a party organizing. Is the situation different up there?
It's very tough for many people. There are many people who have been pushed the margins. They're just living on the margins. You know, and again, because of the nature of and the character of the people who are in power, they have become complacent. They lost, you know, the discipline that we came in with. they are focusing more on how to enrich themselves than how to develop a country in which all citizens can access equal opportunities. And I think that's the biggest problem.
But this squeeze is global. It's not only for
global,
Uganda.
But the responses are different. For example, I've seen countries that have minimized, reduced taxes on fuel and coming with other measures for intervention. You can only do that, though, when you are disciplined. Two, when you appeal the population and there's trust between the population and those who lead the countries. Because when it reaches the point of tightening belts, if the population trusts that these leaders are credible, that they are disciplined, that when they're asking us to tighten belts, they have also tightened theirs, then the country can, be walked out of a crisis with more or less trust between the leaders and the led. But in a country like this, who would trust that these people are they're incapable of even tightening their belts by
Are those issues
and it's sad, but that's the reality.
So
we are basically on our own. Each one would have to survive on their own. If anything was happening and the fuel goes up, just people keep paying the price. Because one, there were no fuel reserves. That's not something they can build in a day. To build fuel reserves, for example, to go and repair, like the Nakasongora, repair the ginger, or expand the capacity, would take years. It can take a night, it can take a week, it can take a month. There are no food reserves. So one hopes that the next regime is going to be more focused, more disciplined, so that they plan for what could happen in the future. Because it doesn't even have to be a global crisis. It can be a local problem. You can have a disaster in terms of drought, you can have a disaster in terms of floods, you can have a disaster, all nature of you can have a breakdown of routes of export, and then you find that your fuel inflows are hampered. So what happens? We don't even have fuel reserves for even 2 days here in this country. We're highly vulnerable. But for some strange reason, we are a very complacent people as Ugandans on one side, but also we erupt at some point. So, because we have had violence here quite a number of times. Wars. So people seem quiet, but at some point they erupt into wars like we've had in the past. So it's tough, but the one thing, in spite of all that we've talked about, in spite of all that we see, the one thing is for us to lose hope. Yeah. And I think that's what kind of makes me a little bit concerned when you bump into people and you find people giving up. And you ask, how can you give up on anything? Because the moment you lose hope, actually, in real life, you start dying.
What did you find on the ground? If I was reading correctly, I think you just came from extended time in, West Nile. What did you find on the ground in relation to people's response to what's happening in the economy?
I don't think there's any part of the country where you can go and you don't find people really complaining. Because, I mean, the price on soap, price on the commodities, the essential commodities, the transportation costs are hitting so many people. So it's understandable. And until the global situation changes, for example, and the fuel prices go down, I don't see what meaningful intervention this regime can undertake.
The regime has spoken about interventions from the State of the Nation address by the president, then the budget speech on behalf of the president, then just recently 2 addresses from the president in relation to the same. Aren't these, in your view, solutions?
I would have missed some parts. I never heard of any meaningful or significant point in terms of what kind of interventions could be done to alleviate the situation for the people. I've not heard. I've heard in Kenya they have made a number of interventions, you know, in monetary terms, in terms of pumping money into particular sectors. I think also reducing taxes on fuel. I've not heard anything.
The government here has elected that that's not a direction they can go, because for starters, it is not sustainable. But in order to give those subsidies, the money has to also come from somewhere in order for
That's the whole
subsidies.
point. Because there's no discipline here. I mean, look at the money they're pumping into by elections, for example. Or the money that they start building for the next election, because that's what happens all the time. But you can't milk a cow without feeding it. For how long would you do that? Because that's, again, something that is happening. From what you hear, the cries within the business community. You know, the squeeze to get money, because I think the government is also in a state of need for more money, you know. So, more reason why those of us who want to see qualitative change keep working day and night.
All right. General Muntu, we have to bring this to a close. So if I could get your way forward on a couple of things. Number one, on the economic situation. What would your way forward there be? What would your, advice be to the people in power, but also to the viewers?
The people in power have lost it. Whatever advice you give them, they lack discipline. And they at the core of anything that can be done in a meaningful way, anything that could change the direction of things in this country is discipline. They lack it. So the groups that intend to take power have to keep working on that. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And for the viewer, your advice to them in relation to, the economic squeeze?
I mean, we're on our own. They will have to look for ways about surviving through this crisis. You know, because there's no way any individual can act in the ways of bring down, for example, fuel prices. Maybe managing at individual levels and refocusing on where to put money and where to make savings and things like that at individual levels. But individuals can't do any meaningful intervention at the national level. Maybe to speak out and add more pressure. I mean, that's something we can keep doing, yes, from all sectors, including those who happen to be supporters of who used to support the regime, to send a signal and say enough is enough. And work towards the meaningful change. Yes, that needs to be done. Yes, that one we can do.
Okay. We started this conversation by looking at Kenya. Even before, I pick from you what lessons you think we can learn from Kenya and a way forward in relation to that for Uganda. You have been in the military, and certain times there is a calm or a sense of calm before a storm. Some people have, thought that that's what's happening in Kenya. Do you read it that way? That this could be the calm before the storm?
I really hope and pray that they remain calm and they go through the court processes and accept whatever comes out of the court in case Azimio goes to court as it says it intends to do, and all of them to wait for the outcomes of the court decisions. My hope and prayer is that they all remained calm. Yeah.
All right. So what do we learn from Kenya as a takeaway? And, how can the region leverage on the good things we've seen in Kenya?
They have made significant progress. The contention that there is now shouldn't suck them into reverting to what they have fallen into before. Yeah, it will be a disaster for them, also for us. Mostly like those of us who are landlocked.
All right.
Yeah.
And finally, those who, have been watching your political journey, who believe in, the workings and the ideology of the Alliance for National Transformation, what should they be expecting from the party and from you who are, steering that party?
That we keep on exerting effort wherever we are, trying to build influence around our message, around sustaining hope in the population, and also remain convinced that we are well positioned in terms of immediate, medium, and long term in doing the things which are necessary to put this country back on track. We have to keep organizing and preparing ourselves. Opportunity is going to knock at some point, and by the time that point, when opportunity knocks, we need to be prepared, and that would, the connection of the two would lead us to success. So people who are in Alliance for National Transformation should not be perturbed by anything, not what they hear on the streets and whatever they hear on newspapers, as long as we're convinced in what we're doing as we are, we're on the right track, and victory will be ours, by God's grace.
General, or retired Major General Gregory Mugisha Muntu, it's been a pleasure having you on the big debate tonight. Thank you for honoring our invitation.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you for hosting me.
Dear viewers, thank you very much for joining us for this edition of the big debate with retired Major General Greg Mugisha Muntu. Until next week when we return with another edition, from me and our guests, it's a good night. God bless you. But stay tuned to the programming here on Seetv. Till next week, good night, don't blink.